Summer is when most gardeners stop sowing, but that's actually a mistake. We don't want our gardens to run out of steam before autumn. But plant these 7 crops before it's too late and you could be harvesting for months to come. These seeds are fast and productive, like carrots, which will be starting later. And some even grow better now than in the spring, including the first one on my list. Bulb or Florence fennel, honestly one of the most elegant vegetables you will ever have the pleasure of growing. It's got these beautiful white, crisp, swollen bulbs, which are in fact swollen leaf stalks, and it boasts beautiful feathery fronds. Honestly, this is every bit as attractive for the ornamental border in amongst your flowers as it is the vegetable garden, and it looks gorgeous on the plate as well, whether roasted into a delicious caramelized unctuousness, grilled or shaved into salads, and it goes perfectly with fish as well. And its sweet notes make it great for teas as well. Midsummer is in fact the perfect time to sow bulb fennel, and that's because if you sow early in the season with lengthening days, they often respond to that by flowering before they've had a chance to form their bulb. But sow now, as days are starting to get shorter and they've got plenty of time to bulk up beautifully as they slide into the cool, moist days of autumn. Proper job. Now, one thing about bulb fennel is that it absolutely loathes root disturbance, so we need to take that into consideration when sowing it. Ideally, I'd be sowing it directly where it's going to grow into rows about ½ inch or 1 centimetre deep, but most of my beds are full at the moment, so the alternative is to sow into plug trays. But I'm just going to sow 1 seed into each plug, or in fact 2, sorry, and then thin to leave the strongest seedling. But I'm going to snip away the excess seedlings so I don't disturb the roots of the one that's left remaining. If we disturb the roots, then there is a risk it could also cause it to bolt or flower prematurely. So I got my sieved or screened all-purpose potting mix, and then 2 seeds per plug. Now the seeds are rather beautiful. They're like the fennel seeds, of course, that you might use to cook with. And so in go 2, and they're about 1 to ½ centimetre deep by the time potting mix goes over the top. And by starting them off like this, of course, it means I can overlap my crops. So while these are starting off, the others that are in the ground can be finishing. So I'm maximising the use of the space I have. And I've chosen a bolt resistant variety just in case, which should up the likelihood of gorgeous tennis ball sized bulbs to enjoy from early autumn onwards. A fascinating fact about fennel is that it contains a compound called anethol. That's the same compound that gives licorice its sweet aniseedy flavour. Really impressive though is that it is 13 times sweeter than sugar. So no wonder bulb fennel tastes so delicious roasted. Once the bulb fennel has filled its plugs, it's time to plant them out. Now I'm just adding a little bit of organic fertiliser. This is blood, fish and bone, and zhuzhing it in. And then the plugs will go in about 1 foot or 30 centimetres apart in both directions. Now, whether you're sowing into plugs or sowing directly where your bulb fennel will grow, the important thing is to keep the soil consistently moist. If you do let the bulbs dry out, then the risk is that the plants will just bolt in response. So keeping them moist avoids that stress response. Another trick is to mulch around plants to lock in that moisture, and I just use dried grass clippings for that. Now as the bulbs start to swell, you can bank up the soil around the bulb, and that will blanch it and make for a sweeter, more delicate texture and flavour. But perhaps your tastes are for something a little bit more bitter. Well, that's where our band of underrated but really rather fantastic salad leaves comes into it. What I call the bitter brigade. That's chicory, endive and radicchio. These are bold and slightly bitter in taste, perhaps, but they have bags of character and cheer, it has to be said, and they are the perfect counterpoint to the more mild lettuce. So if you've never tried them in a mixed salad before, well, you are in for a treat. And when in the heat of summer lettuce is often bolting, these guys will sail through. Now do tell me in the comments below, do you prefer the kind of sweeter tastes of fennel or something a little bitter? So here's what I'm going to be sowing, and first up is a cutting or leaf chicory. This will give a good cut of crisp leaves from summer right the way through to the end of autumn, and most of what we're going to be sowing is remarkably frost tolerant, which makes them fantastic season extenders. And then there is this frizzy type of endive, which has these beautifully intricate, delicate, feathery almost leaves. There are also escarole types with broader, flatter leaves. Both have lovely bitter notes which will make a salad sing. But for me, it's radicchio that takes the crown for this tempting trio, a type of chicory. It has beautiful crimson and white heads that are absolutely stunning, and sowing now gives plenty of time for them to develop good-sized heads in time for autumn and winter. Sowing is exactly the same for all three, rather conveniently. Just sowing into freshly sieved all-purpose potting mix, and then just sowing even a thin pinch of seeds across the surface like that. And then I'm going to cover them over with just a slight bit of potting mix, around about less than 1/4 of an inch, or sort of 5 millimeters or so, like that. Now these will be watered, labelled, and then grown on to germinate somewhere kind of warm and steady, and they should be up pretty quickly at this time of year. And when the seedlings get to this sort of size here, it's time to carefully transfer them into their own plugs to grow on. So just eke them out of their pot and then make a hole. So always hold the seedling by its leaf to avoid damaging the delicate stem, and then use something like a pencil or a little dibber or stick or something to tease the roots down, and then firm back the potting mix around it. These can now grow on until they're ready to plant out once they've filled these little plugs here, and they'll go out so that the endive is spaced around up to 25 centimeters or 10 inches apart in both directions, and chicory and radicchio will need a little bit more room, so those will go out about 1 foot or 30 centimeters apart. Now keep these guys well watered in dry weather, and well, you'll soon have those beautiful heads of leaves. Next up, we're going to talk about a crop that is so easy, so fast and so satisfying, and yet so often overlooked in favour of its summer cousin, the winter radish. Now, if you're used to the beautiful red summer radishes, and there's nothing wrong with that, good stuff, but winter radishes are on another level. They'll blow your mind. We're talking big, bold roots such as black Spanish round with its jet black skin and sharp, peppery white flesh. Then there are the quite magnificent muhly or daikon radishes with roots that grow a foot or more, just magnificent. And then there are beautiful Chinese and Korean varieties in all sorts of shapes and colours. Roasted, pickled, grated into slaws or stirred into soups, winter radishes are a revelation, and they're something I'm keen to grow more of. Winter radishes generally prefer to be sown where they are going to grow, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to rake the soil level, and I'm also going to add a little bit of organic fertiliser. You know, my usual favourite, that blood, fish and bone, but there are vegan alternatives available as well. I'm going to be sowing carrots here in a bit, so I'm going to prepare the whole bed, one side with our winter radish and one with our carrots. Now, sowing winter radishes at this time of year, or any radish for that matter, is quite a smart move because you're far less likely to get flea beetles, those tiny bothersome bugs that kind of nibble away little pit hole marks in the leaves and leave it all spotted. There's just far fewer of them around from late summer, and I can see someone's come out to watch us and inspect the quality of our work. So we're looking to make drills about just under 1/2 inch or 1 centimetre deep. A drill is just the fancy name for a little trough like this. Now we need them a foot apart or 30 centimetres. So what I do is I use this board here, which is about 6 inches or 15 centimetres. I can flip it over like that neatly, and then I know I've got a foot, and I can make my second row. So I've chosen to sow some muhly or daikon radish, as the packet here says the dim sum favourite, and I love dim sums. Now the roots are much chunkier than summer radishes, so once the seedlings come up, I will thin them apart in stages until they are 6 to 8 inches or 15 to 20 centimetres apart, to give them that room to really produce those good sized roots. They'll need consistent watering through the summer. We don't want them to become woody and cracked, those roots, but all being well, we should be lifting our first roots from early autumn. Parsley, endlessly useful, and yet so many gardeners sow it once in spring and then forget about it. I actually like to grow it from those pots of living herbs you get at the supermarket. I break them up into clumps, pot them on, grow them on, and then plant them out. That's how I get most of my parsley. And if you missed our recent video on growing herbs this way, by the way, I'll link to it down in the description. But a midsummer sowing is absolutely worth doing as well. They will crop from autumn right through into winter, and because this is a biennial, it'll then carry on into spring, the following spring, before flowering in summer in a beautiful bug-attracting blaze of glory. Here's one stretching into flower now, and doesn't it look magnificent? Now the curly leaf type like this is super hardy and has a mild sort of flavour. But for a more complex flavour, grow a flat leaf type, which is what we're going to be sowing now. In fact, why not grow both? Parsley seeds have a bit of a reputation for being slow and erratic in their germination, but there are two things we can do to ameliorate that. The first thing is to soak our seeds overnight in lukewarm water. So I've had these soaking for just under 24 hours actually, and that'll help to sort of soften up the seed coat. So now we can strain this off. The second thing is just to sow into warm potting mix, so anything between about 65 to 70 Fahrenheit, which is 18 to 21, and at this time of year that shouldn't be a problem. So I can see that the seeds have actually swollen up a bit, so that's clearly done the trick. And then to sow, I'm just going in over a pot of our potting mix here, just the normal all-purpose stuff. They do clump together a bit, so just try and space them out a bit as best you can. And then just the slightest amount of potting mix over the top. Now something else I'm going to do to help them along, once I've watered them, is to put over a bit of clear plastic as well, secured in place with a band. That will create a really humid environment, which will help to keep that moisture in, because that is quite important. Now you will need patience. Parsley seeds, even though I've soaked them and really prepared them, can take 2, even up to 4 weeks to germinate, so don't lose hope, just be patient. Once the seedlings pop up, I'll carefully tease them apart and pop them into their own pots to grow on a bit. Now you can sow these directly into the soil, into drills about a foot or 30 centimetres apart, and then thin out the seedlings until they are around 6 inches or 15 centimetres apart. So we're back over here next to our winter radishes to sow my next crop, which is carrots. Sweet, earthy and incredibly delicious. You absolutely cannot match carrots you have grown yourself. They cost so little in the shops, but that's not why you grow them. You grow them for that super carroty taste, if that's not a silly thing to say. The window for sowing carrots is closing fast, so we need to get them in ideally by the start of the month to have decent sized roots ready for autumn. And that's for main crop carrots that will store over winter, even in the soil in mild areas, kind of like mine. But if you're sowing later in the month, you might want to opt instead for a quick growing salad variety that will be in and done before the growing season finishes. Now again, I'm using this little plank here, and my rows are about 10 to 12 inches or 25 to 30 centimetres apart, because these are chunkier roots, these main crop carrots. We've had a reasonable amount of rain recently, but if it's been dry where you are, let me show you a little trick. Carrots really do need consistent moisture and coolness to germinate without a hitch. So the first job is to water along the drill that you've made before sowing, and this will create a lovely cooling, soothing pocket around the seeds. Carrots do need to be sown directly where they're to grow, otherwise you run the risk of kind of misshapen and often hilarious looking roots. I mean, they all taste the same, but I think I prefer kind of decent sized, good straight roots, so direct is the way I go. So nice and thinly is the order of the day here. Keep a steady hand, just twiddle them along like that. Now carrots can take anywhere from 10 to 20 days to come up, so we're going to need to make sure that we do have consistent moisture throughout. So keep these really well watered, and once they do pop up, I will thin them out to in stages about 1 to 2 inches or 3 to 5 centimetres apart, and the bigger spacings will give hopefully bigger roots. There we are, and I like to mark the ends of the rows with a little stick like that just so I know where I'm looking, because they can take a while to germinate. Now, hot, dry weather is a real enemy of carrot seedlings, so I have a workaround to help them germinate. So I give them a final water just to wet the seeds from the top as well as around them, and then I'm going to add this plank here. So you can add a plank over the rows like that and just leave it in place. What this does is it shades the soil and keeps it cooler and moister for longer, but we need to remain vigilant. Check under it with your beady eyes every day, and at the very first sign of germination, whip it away and let them grow. Now, for those biggest, chunkiest roots, you can't beat a main crop variety of carrots, and these are the ones that tend to store well, and here are some recommended varieties. Now, once the seedlings come up, keep an eye out for slugs which love them. Set your favourite slug control into place, and I'll link to our video on slugs down below. Another thing to watch out for is carrot fly. If you've had problems with these low-flying flies in the past, then just cover your crop straight away with some sort of row cover such as fleece. But slugs and flies aside, these should grow away steadily to give those lovely chunky roots, which can either be left in the ground over winter in milder areas or lifted up and stored in a cool but frost-free place. So there are your midsummer sowings sorted. Now, if you'd like exact, precise dates for sowing and planting where you are, because of course every location is going to be different, do check out our garden planner. It produces bespoke sowing and planting times for every single crop that you could possibly want for your plan. Very handy. It uses data from your nearest weather station to achieve that. Now, if you'd like to try it for free, do try our 7-day trial over here. Happy sowing, and I will catch you next time.